When you start living with the end in mind, everything starts to change. What are people going to say about you? What message is your life going to speak when you're long gone? Because you weren't born by accident. You didn't just happen to be where you're at and happen to watch this video. There is always a reason. So welcome to the Fuse Life podcast. This is episode 88. And this is the second time I am having Brian with us. The first one was amazing. If you haven't seen it, you should go back, check that out on YouTube. Easy to find. Just type his name in there and Fuse Life. But we're all about God-given assignment. We're all about heaven meeting earth in and through you and me. And my guest today is amazing. I just want to say this, like I really honor him, his walk. I value his heart, his wisdom. The last time I did a podcast with him, I realized how sharp he is because he answered my questions in 2 lines, and then I needed another question. You know, I just want to say that, Brian, it's so awesome for me that I'm connected to you and that you're willing to be here and hang out with me like this. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks so much. Honor you, man. You're a beast.
Yeah, well, I received that. Hopefully not the mark of the beast. So just to start us off, can you just tell those that don't know you a little bit about you? I mean, you've done a whole bunch of stuff, so you can take it where you want to take it there with that.
Yeah, so my wife and I did university ministry 22 years. That's where we really began to kind of have a framework and a true value for being mystical and intellectual at the same time. And then I have schools. I do have a mystical school, a school of divine intelligence. I speak. I'm an author. I have a wellness retreat business that my friend Eowyn, I think you know Eowyn, Bulchandani and I are getting ready to launch and build. And then I'm dabbling in some anime as well, a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, awesome. And obviously, I want to say that, like, I think your humility really stands out to me and the simplicity in which you walk out the gospel. So I love it. I'm very excited. So maybe we should start with what this says on the back here, interactive creation. We started a little bit with that. What is interactive creation to you? What do you mean when you say that or see that?
Yeah, so I have a phrase that I say, it's our theology shapes our psychology, which governs our physiology and impacts the cosmology. So how we see God, our theology, our framework of God, shapes everything we think about, not just about God or spiritual things, everything. And that psychology governs our body, our physiology. So as our mind is renewed, Romans 12, of course we're transformed, but it's actually transfiguration. So there's a transfiguration of the body, or transfiguration of the DNA specifically. And that transfiguration where there's more light actually is impacting creation, because hardwired in every living system, every living organism, embedded within that thing, that species, whatever it might be, is the desire for sons and daughters of God to be revealed. And so when our mind is being renewed, it's actually affecting creation. It's drawing to ourselves the supply of creation. Moses, when he said, "Hear me, O earth," Job chapter 12, it says, "Speak to the earth and it will instruct you, the beasts of the field, the birds of the air." There's this dynamic of interaction. Like it's not just like we're walking along our journey of life. There's a participation. And so to me, it's like, I love sonship. I know you do too, identity. But at a certain point, we got to move on. Like, not away from being a son or a daughter, but sonship is unto kingship. We begin to exercise the rule of God, the domain of God in the earth and physical creation. And we have a cosmic position in Christ. So there's a role we have in creation, and to have a voice of authority. And so that's why when Moses says, "Hear me, O earth," he understood the ancient technology that the earth responds to humanity. Disobedience or obedience. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And so when you look at sonship, identity, maybe would you say it's the maturing of a son when you say kingship? Could that be, or is this a separate thing? How do you view that?
Yeah. I mean, there's kind of 3 phases, Greek words that are used for a child or a son. Nepios is the infant phase where, we come to Christ, right? And it's like, what is this world, and how do I pray, and what is this Bible? And we're kind of learning the stuff. And then Teknon is an adolescent, and that's, and the enemy works in every phase differently too. The Nepios phase, he's like, hey, let's get you back. Let's bring all of your old friends that you've never seen or haven't seen in a long time. They're all going to start coming up into your world again. So the enemy's trying to get you back into your past, back into the patterns. And then Teknon phases, that doesn't work anymore. So it's going to try to get a person consumed with the cares and affairs of this world, to live anxious. And then there's Huios. Huios is a mature son. That's like the new man. That's Ephesians 4, the fivefold, for example, has a shelf life. It's not a means to an end. Like it's, hey, once there's unity in the faith and maturity, that we're a mature son and daughter, there's no need for the fivefold anymore. And so that maturity is very impacting on so many different levels. And that's what I see that as, is, sonship unto kingship is I'm walking as a mature Huios, and now I can function as a king in the earth.
Wow. Well, already you can feel the depth in what Brian's saying, guys. I just want to check that my sound is good. Someone, you're saying that I sound quiet. Is this better? Or do I need to hold this? Maybe I need to hold this beautiful mic up here like this. So, I mean, that's deep, right? Like you're going really deep here. There's so many ways we can take this conversation, but when you look at the climate right now, the spiritual climate, the natural climate of the world and what's going on, what are your thoughts, and where do you see the body's biggest need to step up or step into, so to speak?
I think discernment is one. I think people don't. I mean, there's a lot of prophets that are finding their data points from what's trending in the natural. Like sometimes I'm like, are you just reading like a report that came out from the intelligence committee, or are you actually hearing from the Lord? Like, so it's like we need to discern what's actually going on. I think the other piece for me is like it's the governance piece. So, Abraham's promised two types of seed, sand seed and star seed. So sand seed is natural descendants, the Jews. Star seed is us. We're the above born, the born again of revelation, not location. And if you look at the stars in the heavens, there's three primary things that they do. They light the earth. We're to be the light of the world. They are signs to the earth. We're signs to the world that there's another world. And then the stars govern the seasons of the earth, which tells me the sons of light should be governing the seasons of the world, not a victim of whatever the wave is. And I think there's a need to grow up into the head Christ a little bit more, to understand like, hey, actually, we have a cosmic position that can actually affect what's actually going on here. And so sometimes we're reacting to things, shadow boxing the enemy, when if we would just function from our place of leisure in Christ, seated in the heavenly realms, then we can actually govern. But that starts with being able to govern yourself. If we can't govern our own atmosphere, we can't really govern any atmosphere outside of ourselves. And so that's the identity journey, right? We're going to govern our mindset and emotions. So that's why I'm saying sonship is unto something else. And as we come into, hey, I know how to govern my emotions and my reactions, and now I can begin to govern. I call it governing the temple, the atmosphere of the temple. We're the temple. And then you govern the atmosphere of the field. We all have a field that comes out of our heart space. From the heart flow the issues of life. And then we can govern the atmosphere of the world. But there's a progression. And so I think the body needs to come into that progression.
So practically, if you were to kind of help me understand, or help someone who's listening understand, what could this look like practically from a baby coming into the fullness as you see it? What could that look like?
Well, I think it begins with, I'm not a victim of my thought life. I actually control what I think about. I choose what I think about. And so come into that place of governance at our thought life, like I can literally choose what I think. And I think there's a belief out there. It's just like, well, there's nothing I can do. It's just all these thoughts are coming. It's like, well, yes, there is. And it's the same with emotion or energy in motion. This energy has to move on. And so to be able to move on, to process emotion, those things begin to open up our internal, it establishes a strong internal framework so that we can handle the responsibility of life and the pressure that can come with life. And so because of that, then God begins to increase the platform, the influence of what he's called us to do. So that we begin to see what's called a metron, a sphere of influence. Our faith, the measure of faith, authority, grace, all this is increasing to the size of our metron. And so that's what God's wanting to do in this journey is, and if we don't choose to progress, he'll just turn life into a circle and we'll keep going around and around until we get it. But he's patient enough for that. He's a patient father. He's not in a rush. And so for us, it's like we just have to embrace that process. There's no identity without process. There's no destiny without identity. And so we've got to begin at that point. And then the next phase, I would just say, learning to be in tune with our body when we're in different scenarios. That's the emotion side. So if I'm talking to you, for example, and let's just say for whatever reason, I've got a problem with people who aren't from the United States. And I'm just like, I'm getting triggered. And it's like, well, I got to govern that space. And so I've got to govern things that are coming at me from the outside of me. And again, if I'm governing the field, then I'm going to be entrusted to actually govern an atmosphere of a room, an atmosphere in a city, where it's like, it begins the impact of my internal choices and decisions are impacting the world around me, which is interactive creation as well.
And then how do you view coming into the fullness? I'm just intrigued. I hope this is okay. We're just having this conversation like this, but so Jesus is on this Mount of Transfiguration, as they say it. He's transfigured. How do you view some of that, of a son that this creation is waiting for the fullness of? In your opinion, what does that look like? What is that? What's the functionality like? Or what are your thoughts on that?
We're being entrusted with a greater level of governance. That's not just on world, it's also off world. Our governance is not limited to the earth. We have a role in the cosmos. He's the God of the cosmos. So it's, for me, if I can use the example of like the prophetic. So you've got, one realm is we can all prophesy, right? Anyone can hear God. I can get a word for somebody and it's going to be encouraging. It's going to build them up. And in that realm, it's like the process of identity. And then you've got the realm of the gift of prophecy. And that's the process of family. I'm learning how to live in spiritual family. And so now my words are being honed because there's feedback and input in my life. So I'm actually, are there patterns of my words coming true? And then you've got the prophet, the office. This is a realm of authority. This is a process of authority. But it begins in the I can hear God. Then we progress into I can hear him very accurately. So it's like my word is actually very specific. And impact is in an individual life, or maybe it's for a church or an organization. And now that transitions to, hey, my words are to a nation. It's to the whole earth. God's wanting to entrust more and more to us, but there's got to be a faithfulness to steward it. And as we just steward and we walk this thing out, that process of identity, the process of family, and the process of authority, then God's going to say, all right, let's actually see the governance level increase so that your role in creation, there's a carbon footprint here that's more significant.
Wow. Say that again?
Does that make sense?
Well, to as much as I can understand it, it does.
Someone says makes sense to me. I'll take that. Rosie, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Rosie. Boom. And it does. The thing is, like, the more you speak, the more you can sense that there is a depth to all of this, So what do you say to this journey? Like, I know there are people who get, like, say, for example, there was a gathering and everyone was giving each other a word, and someone gave somebody a prophetic word that they were like, that's not right, that's inaccurate. And then they get angry that we're doing it like that. Where I might look at it like a practice space, a safe place for people to grow, like you're talking about, where you're hearing, but now you're getting more and more accurate.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? And is there space for that, or are you just supposed to be accurate out of like?
I think that's a perfectionist mindset. It's very religious.
Hmm.
And perfectionism is the fruit of religion. And so to me, it's R&D, it's research and development. Like if you look at any product, it went through R&D.
Hmm.
Like, the iPhone that you have in your hand, if you have one, or Android, whatever it is, there was a long process of R&D, and where we're just learning, is this thing going to work? And so if that can't fit in our growth in Christ, then there's a problem. Like, there's got to be a space to ground this stuff out. And I think that's the process of family to me, is like, hey, we're just grounding out in the process of spiritual family, and it's okay if we're off here. This is a space to actually grow.
Hmm.
The purpose of that is so that when you're outside of that context in the world, there's a credibility and accuracy.
Hmm. Hmm. And so it's interesting, like you talk about, the religious mindset or a religious spirit or thought pattern, ways of thinking. For someone like you who's so mystical, but then you don't seem one dimensional, can you speak to that a little bit, of how we are seeing the body now come into exploring the things of God? And what if there are people that are a bit worried or scared that they might fall off the deep end? Like, for example, like, people that are maybe exploring sound, frequency, vibration, and start talking about it, and they have this pull by God towards certain things that maybe the church they're in or the people they're around are like, no, 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 like that's all wrong. Yeah, can you speak to that a little bit? Just some of your thoughts around
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think part of that is fear. There's a fear of the unknown. There's actually probably a greater fear in the enemy to deceive a person than in God to protect a person.
it.
And to me, it's union. It's all about the union we have with Christ. And so, like, take frequency, for example, people get nervous about the word frequency, and I'm like, but there's frequencies. Like, it's not like, it's not like they don't exist.
Mm,
What's happening in some new age circles is they're deifying frequency. And frequency, matter and frequency are the physical demonstration of the spiritual substance of Christ.
mm,
It's not that he's locked within the frequency, it's just part of his substance. And so to me, the frequency, it's not about the frequency in the sense of, oh man, I've got to find the answer there. It's like, this is just a physical demonstration of his substance in creation. John 1, Colossians 1 both say everything visible and invisible came into existence through Christ. He was a transitioning agent between what was undetectable and then became detectable. And part of that is matter and energy. And so we need not be afraid of God's design. And so to me, it's like, if my heart is open to God and to people, meaning there's some people in my life I call editors. They have permission to speak, to bring feedback and input. If that's in place in my life, I'm going to be fine. Like,
mm,
the problem is when people isolate. Isolation's governed by deception. People will always be deceived when they say, hey, no one understands me. Like, I'm way beyond you. Like, the revelation I'm getting, no one else is getting. Like, all this talk is like ridiculous, number one. But number two, it creates this pride, superiority complex that says, well, I'm going to do this myself, just God and I. And if we
mm.
don't have people in our life that have a space to speak, then there's going to be problems. But if there are, there's honestly nothing to worry about.
Wow. Yeah. Come on. So when you bring up this new age, like you brought up the word new age, and then some people say there is no such thing as new age, and that's getting like,
Well,
like
we're
getting
in new age.
crazy. Yeah. Yeah. And so I'd love to know some of your thoughts on that. Like, is there a line, and how do you draw that line for someone that's exploring? Because on one side you have these people that are like, fear, 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 no, 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 don't look that way. Everything's bad. Breathing is bad. Yoga is bad. It's all bad. But then on the other side, you go, everything's good. It's all God. Like the crystals or the bowls, or take it all. But you mentioned something really interesting with the deifying it. Like, can you talk about that a little bit? Like, where do you draw the line, or how do you see the line should be drawn?
I mean, if I'm looking to something outside of God as a source, there's a problem. Like, he's the source of all things. Like, we're breathing because he breathed into us. Like, I'm moving around because he's animated my body. I have a spirit because, well, he created that space, that spiritual substance. Like, so for me, anything I'm looking to for an answer, for direction, it's like he's the source for everything in my life. Everything else is secondary. Everything else is just simply, again, it could be that spiritual physical demonstration of who he is. And so for me, the deification side is I'm looking to energy. I'm looking to, the bowls, whatever, the crystals, all that stuff. And I'm not against that stuff. It's just like, it's a secondary piece to me. Like, I have a relationship with my father. Like, I can talk to him. Like, why would I need to have a conversation with anything else? It's just like Jesus was like, hey, I don't say anything unless the Father says it. I'm not like, I pray that they would be one just as we are one. Like, oneness to me is that your life's moving at the speed of your awareness of oneness. Like, confidence is a consequence of oneness. Like, everything fruitful is flowing because we're one. And so if I have a greater awareness of that, then I have a greater awareness of his creation, because he's the creator. I have a greater awareness of my role in creation. And so I don't have to be afraid of what was created. It just comes down to what's the source code about? Like, am I looking to this to define who I am? Am I looking to this to bring direction? That's where things, to me, get a little off track.
And that's not necessarily something we can tell about somebody else. So, or like, how do you view that? Because if someone is doing something with the fruit,
you judge a tree by its fruit.
And how would you define fruit? Like, if I'm looking for fruit, what should I look for?
The fruits of the spirit, of course. Are they kind? Are they patient? Are they loving? Like, are there people that know them? Like, to me, that's probably one of the biggest issues that I see is people aren't really known. Like, religion survives because of the fear of intimacy. So we build all these structures and we relate to doctrines and creeds. And then if I don't agree with those anymore, then I can't be in relationship with you, which means it was never about relationship with each other. And so we live in this world that's a bit virtual, and we don't know how to actually know each other. Like, that to me is super dangerous. Like for Joseph and I, like, I want to know you. Like, why does a person fall? We always hear this, like, well, how did that person fall? Like, man, they had this great ministry and they're doing this. Like, I can tell you what it is every single time, 100% of the time. They were not known. They weren't known. Like, no one knew them. They knew their gift. They knew their anointing. They knew this or that, all the external stuff, but no one really knew. And so if we can be in a place of depth, it's like, that's why I was saying, like, the process of family. Like, look, if we're known, there's nothing to worry about. There's nothing to be afraid of here. Like, it's in the light.
Yeah.
Like, whatever we don't know about, whatever we hide has dominion in our life. And so if I'm in a space where it's like, hey, it's in the light here with some people, there's nothing to worry about.
Wow. I love that. We have a group, a Fuse Life group, and that's kind of the biggest thing I've always talked about, is to be seen, to be heard, and to be known, and to want to be known also, to know and to want to be known. That's big, because a lot of people actually run from that. It's quite interesting, especially leaders that I've seen who almost see it as a weakness to be known fully, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, I
Wow.
grew up
So
in that ecosystem.
say that again, please.
I grew up in that ecosystem,
Mm,
fear of being known. And as a leader, you lead from a distance. I even had leaders that said, never become friends with the people that you're leading. I'm like, then what are we doing? Like, what is this? This is weird then.
man. So if we circle back, when you said you have editors in your life, I know you have three different types in the circles that you talk about that you have relationships. Can you
Yeah.
touch on that a little bit? And how does one find an editor or a couple of editors that they can start to walk with?
Yeah. An editor is just, I don't like the term accountability. Accountants are great for talking about money, but not about relationships. And so
Mm,
I just call it editability. So these are people that they've got permission to say, hey, this is a run on sentence. Let's change this. Let's put a better adjective here. So my story is becoming better.
mm,
They have permission to the manuscript of my life to bring some change. And so that space and finding those people is kind of my process. Is sometimes I feel drawn to a person and I'll just have a conversation like, hey, like I recognize there's a journey. You've gone far ahead where I am. And I value input in my life. Would you ever be interested in just having some conversations? Yeah, awesome.
mm.
So sometimes it's just the simplicity of like, hey, can I bounce a few things off of you? And maybe it's like I'm thinking through something or I'm facing a circumstance. And then other times it's been kind of like a God ordained thing, like, hey, this was a God connection and it just happened. I mean, there's one guy in particular, we invited him to speak. My wife and I were doing university ministry at the time. And I introduced him and the words just come out of my mouth. And I was like, and this is a spiritual father in our life. And I was like, oh, okay. It was a God thing. It was like,
Mm,
this was a God moment. And so to me, like having some spiritual fathers and mothers, I think is really important. I know people get nervous sometimes with that terminology. So you might be more comfortable with an editor, but
mm,
either way, it's the same type of a relationship. They have, they can get into our peripheral vision. We can get tunnel vision, of course.
mm.
Everything's amazing. And someone in the peripheral is like, over here, it's not amazing. Let's talk about this over here.
So good. And so what are can we quickly touch on the other two that you normally
Yeah.
talk about, people that you walk with? And
Yeah. So editors, partners would be the second one. These are kind of, you've linked arms, common vision, common goals. Doesn't mean it has to always be peer to peer, but, and then inheritors, who are the people that you're pouring your life into. And so it's good just to kind of assess in different seasons the relationships. You might have to move people out of a circle, set some boundaries, and maybe realize you're out of sync. Like if all your relationships are editors, you're selfish. If all your relationships are partners, you're shallow. If all your relationships are inheritors, you're a slave. So you
wow,
gotta have balance.
that is so good. So much depth. Look, I'm gonna plug in the divine intelligence
Yeah,
school that Brian's doing. The links in there. You should connect with Brian if you want to be a healthy disciple, a healthy son. You need to connect. I hope someone's writing notes. We're gonna have to do some footnotes of this one because there's so much good stuff in here, and you will have to rewatch this. Okay, that's my little ad over there in between. So, just coming back now to the thing that mystifies me is here you are, and you talk about the cosmos, and you talk about the sand seed, the star seed, and you're talking about these mystical things. But then you also acknowledge that you've had these encounters with like a principality. You talk about deliverance, casting out demons. Then you talk about discipleship. Then you post about people getting saved in Pakistan. You know, watching a message. This is a fullness that you don't see commonly. There's usually people grab something, gravitate to it, and then just become that one dimensional. And they start saying things like, well, demons are just a construct or whatever. Can we touch on this a little bit? Because I think the people that are walking with Fuse, what we're doing, are coming into the fullness, not a one dimensional thing. And I'd love to get your perspective on that.
yeah, that's good, man. I've tried to live my life where I can learn something from anyone. So like if I'm in a room with Baptists, there's something about their relationship with God that I need. And I think sometimes what you're referring to is like, hey, we've got it and we've got it figured out. So now we're going to build walls around this and protect what we know. And no matter who I'm with, there's a part of their journey with God that I need in my own. And so because of that, just posture I've tried to have, it's like, I feel like there's a greater flow of revelation and knowledge that comes because I'm honoring people where they are. You know, like I spoke to a bunch of, crazy charismatic Catholics, and the first thing I said is like, hey, I just honor that you protected mysticism when we didn't. We went cessationist at the Reformation. I said, you protected the mystical side. And I just honor you guys for that. It's amazing. And so I think starting from that point of honor, it's going to kind of prevent the categories, the labels, and then the other side is I get nervous when people are like, man, we have got it figured out. I'm just like, I don't think you do. Like, I mean, Paul was like, hey, we see in part. Like, no one is seeing everything. So I try to read stuff that I know is going to be opposite to some of the things I believe because I want to hear their perspective. Like, I'm not afraid of the opposite perspective. I'm going to learn something in that. And so I think the danger is we get a pride in what we know when, to me, it's like, take someone having like a third heaven encounter. They take an encounter that's like, if you look at a beach and let's say the whole beach is heaven, their encounter is one grain of sand. And they're like, heaven is like this. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe a part of it is. You're dogmatically saying all of it is like this. And I'm like, I don't think so. Like you're seeing a tiny sliver, you're experiencing a tiny piece. And that's why the body of Christ is important. Like there's a part of your breakthrough that I need. There's a part of your journey that I need. And we all come together as one body. Then there's a greater flow of revelation. So kind of back to that maturity piece, the mature son is a mature body that's coming to the head.
So good.
Hey guys, I just want to take a quick minute to tell you about our Royal Hybrids group coaching program. Over a year ago, the Lord started speaking to me about a group of people, a tribe that would only get their value, their affirmation, that would only get their identity from who they are in God and nothing else. And from that place, they were going to do great things on the earth. In the last year, we have seen a whole bunch of people jump into our program, solidify themselves in their identity with God, and from that place, actually start to engage their purpose. Fuse Life talks about the 6 trees: your spirit, your soul, your body, and then your relationships, your finances, and your purpose. We have seen a whole bunch of people come through this, get solidified in who they are, and then begin their own projects, whether it's a teen mums project, whether it's a coaching, counseling business, or a painting business, publishing your children's book, publishing a puzzle book. We have seen people do all of these kind of things, and we just know that this is just the beginning. So you want to go to www.fusebornformore.com/Royal Hybrids, or just click the link in the caption and make sure to check out what we are doing. We would love to have you as part of our tribe. Now, back to the podcast.
So how do you view discipleship when we now take all this into account? And I want to give a bit of a framework for why I'm asking this question. And I hope this is okay. I'm really enjoying this, and I'm really getting annoyed that it's already 35 minutes in. This has gone too quick. So discipleship, right? We hear about these DMMs, these discipleship movements, so disciple making movements, and they're going crazy. They're doing awesome work in underground churches and in persecuted nations, like we know with Iran and with Afghanistan now. Well, so how do you view discipleship when it comes to some of this stuff? Because a lot of the disciple making movements focus on, I'm going to lead you to the Lord, and then you're going to lead other people to the Lord. And there doesn't seem to be more of a maturity part in there or a component in there. What are your thoughts on that? And how do you view discipleship?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Jesus chose the 12 to be with him. That was the priority to begin with. You know, we could argue he could have chosen better, right? He prayed all night. I'm like, these are the guys, really? But, you know, it wasn't like, hey, I carved out a whole plan here on a fig tree and let's walk through this now. It's like the priority of Jesus was heart connection first.
Mm.
And so from that place of heart connection, you know, that's the place, that process of discipleship where we're being known and things are being called out in these guys. Like they probably weren't used to that. Like someone calling out their stuff in front of them. He didn't even do it privately. It's like, hey, you know, and so there was a depth there because he was preparing them for the significance of what they would carry. And so I think that's important in discipleship is you're preparing people to carry the significance of what has been deposited in their life.
Mm.
So it's back to the internal framework. Like if I'm not preparing a person to handle the pressures of life and the promotion of life, then I'm doing them a disservice. I'm doing the kingdom a disservice. And so I agree that we need to raise people up to reach their friends immediately. Absolutely. 100%. But they shouldn't go alone.
Mm.
Like Jesus never sent anyone alone. So, I mean, to use an example, say you came to Christ and it's me and another guy and we're praying with you and you're like, awesome. Well, out of my friend and I, we're going to pray and one of us is going to come with you to hang out with your friends. Awesome. And so we're commissioning you. My friend goes with you. We're commissioning you guys together. You guys go. And now you have someone that you can find depth with. And so to me, it's two pieces. It's like, let's reach our friends, but let's not do it alone. Understand that there's something significant inside that has to be prepared to be released. And so what happens is some discipleship kind of modules that I've seen is it's producing orphans. They're a slave to the Great Commission. And look, the Great Commission is great. You know, the gifts of the Spirit are great, but you can be a slave to the gifts. Like it's like a person who can't not prophesy over people. Like, hey, can you just sit there and not prophesy? They're finding their identity and prophesying over people. And so to me, it's like, hey, I mean, we would even pull people out in our university ministry that were super gifted. And I was like, hey, you're going to take 3 months and I don't want you prophesying over anybody.
Wow.
It reveals like, is my identity in this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I know the gift. I want it to be more significant. So it's not flowing from I'm trying to get my identity, but I already have it. And that's a different flow.
Wow, I get it. But then what do you say to, like, it could seem like a slower way of doing it in a sense, but then I guess you come back to Jesus only taking 12. You know, I don't even really know what I'm asking. I just love this discussion.
I think it's like special ops. Like I remember one time, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago or so, maybe a little more, but God was like, hey, do you want numbers or do you want special ops? I said, I want special ops. Like, give me 30 people, 10 people who will rip the world upside down. Not people, but like, you know, just bring the kingdom. Like, yeah, I'll take that all day long versus 10,000 people who are just kind of like, I don't know, like, I'm not sure who I am. It's just like, give me people who know who they are, or at least are open to knowing who they are. That will wreak havoc on darkness. Like, let's do that. Man. And so I think we have a measurement of success that has to be a lot of people. I mean, if you look at Jesus' ministry, it was not successful. Like he chooses 12, one kills himself. At his greatest hour of need, only one is there. The others are hiding. Like, this is not success. Like, all the crowds have left. None of the crowds are there. And it's like, dude, this, from a natural perspective, it's like, this is a mess. Like, and yet 11 people wreaked havoc in a massive way. They were special ops.
That's so good. So what are your thoughts on the ones that go, it's all about souls, it's all about souls, and they, like, I'm sure you've met people like that will say, instead of spending time with all these guys and maturing, you should be souls. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I think they're an evangelist that has to partner with a pastor.
Mm,
You know, I think their heart is right on. They're an evangelist, right? That's going to be their lane. But there has to be, the fivefold's got to work together. And so the pastor is about process. They have a value for process. An
mm,
evangelist has a value for the moment of encounter and salvation. They're not great disciple makers, evangelists, but
mhm,
it's not really their lane.
mm,
It's not a bad thing. It's just not totally their lane. And so to me, like if you sustain an atmosphere, you can establish a climate.
mm,
But to be able to sustain an atmosphere like in a city or a region, the fivefold has to work together. There has to be a flow. And so there
mm,
has to be a value in what you bring because it's a piece that isn't totally in my lane. Like I'm more apostolic prophetic. I'm not pastoral like at all,
mm,
at all. And so I've had to have people that were like to be partnered with. Otherwise, people get lost with no process.
mm.
So I'm just like, let's go build this thing. Let's make it happen. This is what I'm seeing. We're going to do this. And then it's like people get lost in the fray if the pastor's not like, hey, let's walk this out. And yeah.
Mm. Wow. You just got me thinking about a whole bunch of things. I forgot my question. This is so good. So as a son, so there are people that talk about sonship and they're like, the fivefold's done. Like, we don't need the fivefold. And what are your thoughts on that and the function of the fivefold? Do you believe that every person at some point comes through the function in some way, or because we're always coming into that maturity? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, we haven't even reached the proper flow of the fivefold. So it hasn't reached its shelf life. Like I haven't
Mm,
really seen a true proper flow of the fivefold. There's like glimpses of kind of like three together, but like
mm.
all five, I'm like, I don't know. I haven't seen much of that at all anywhere on earth. And so
Wow.
for me, that's why I don't think we're near the shelf life yet.
Mm.
But I think the other side is you were asking about, remind me the second half of that
Oh,
question.
just people like who talk about sonship and how we don't need that. But then,
Yeah.
do you believe that every person matures into this function and then into the fullness? What are your thoughts on that? Or not everyone's gonna play a part in terms of the fivefold?
I think the fivefold's not limited to the church. There's
Mm,
apostles in the marketplace and pastors in business and etc. And so I kind of do a whole teaching on the fivefold as correlating to the five layers of the earth's atmosphere. And then I look at manifestations of each one in society. And so, you take like a prophet, well, detectives are prophets in the marketplace. Whistleblowers are prophets in the marketplace. So you have these expressions of it outside the church walls. So I feel like everyone kind of aligns with at least one of those
mm,
in the way they are wired. And so I think it's just I've got to value where everyone's at, and I can't just value where I'm at.
mm.
And then I think with
Wow.
sonship, I term it more like I said in the beginning, it's unto something else. It's not like I leave being a son. We're never going to leave being a son or a
Mm,
daughter.
mm,
God's not like, hey, you're not a son anymore. It's like, well, we're always sons and daughters, but now I'm functioning as a king or a queen in the earth. And so it's that progression. It's like revival. Revival is unto reformation. It's not like a means to an end.
mm, mm. So, taking all this into account, if we go into, like, say, the subject of assignments and assignments that people have or purpose, how do you think we should gauge assignments? Like, there are people that will say, "Well, I'm in my assignment. I'm doing my assignment," and it could be all kinds of things, and some things sound crazy, and you don't want to judge any person, but how would you know that someone's really on a God assignment, a God-given assignment? What are some things you think would be important?
I think it's important just to say we're kind of all trying to figure it out. Like,
Mm,
I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves and it's like, I look at people's journey and I'm just like, everyone's kind of working hard with what they know to
mm,
do what they feel God's called them to do. Like, it's really difficult to mess up the will of God. Like, you have to work very deliberately to do that, because it's like we are the will of God. So it's like anything I'm doing that's, a desire is of the Father, right? So it's of the Father.
mm,
Like, if your heart connection with God is open and people, you're going to know if you're not supposed to be doing something.
mm,
Like, I feel like if I look at my personal journey, like when I went to Utah, it was like, I am supposed to go to Utah. Like, there was no plan B. There was no B option. It was just A, and that's Utah.
mm,
Then my wife and I went to Sacramento, and it was a choice. It was like, we could have went to Santa Cruz. We didn't feel like we were supposed to be there, so we went to Sacramento. It wasn't really what was planned, and this stuff kind of evolved out of it. And then San Diego became another, hey, this is a God moment. This is where you're supposed to be. And so I feel like different seasons, some it's like kind of a sovereign, this is it. And
mm,
other times it's like, well, what do you want to do? What?
mm,
And so then when it comes to the assignment piece, it's like, to me, it's like, am I doing something that ties into my purpose in life? And so, like, I was just working with a woman doing some coaching and kind of walking her through some stuff. And we were starting to define that she's a person of process. She's a pastor,
mm,
but not
mm,
called to ministry. And I'm like, you value one-on-one. I said,
mm,
so you need to make sure anything you're doing, all the structure that you're building, empowers you to do one-on-one.
mm,
Because all the other distractions are pulling you away from your true purpose. Because all the breakthrough happens when she does the one-on-one stuff. People are having
mm,
crazy things happen. And so that's where as we are growing and learning, we start to hone and carve out, take out the additives, the process stuff that doesn't belong, and we're functioning at full steam ahead.
mm. So good. So many questions. Guys, if you guys got questions, put them on here so we can answer some of them. Oh, so Brian can answer
Great to
some of
see
them.
everybody.
Say that again.
I was just saying, great to see everybody.
Yeah, well, we've had a 40 something live this whole time, which is awesome.
Awesome.
I do want to ask you about end times, the end time conversation. If you're okay with that.
Yeah.
Seems to be one of the most divisive conversations. I've seen people lose it, flip their lid over this thing. And it's so interesting looking at all the views, the different views. And it seems like every view could have a hole, and I don't know. I get the feeling that no one really knows exactly what's about to go down or how things go down. But there are people that would like to say they do. Can you speak to that a little bit and maybe a healthy way to view what's happening in the world right now?
Yeah. Yeah. This is a powerhouse topic where people get very energized. And I think it kind of ties into what I was recently saying. It's like we all see in part. I think getting super dogmatic about this, I don't think is really fruitful. It's like I have a personal opinion, a perspective, but I wouldn't sit there and die on that hill. It's not an absolute thing to me.
Mm,
To me, it's like if we're going glory to glory, faith to faith, grace to grace, strength to strength, then Proverbs even says brighter and brighter. And that means there should be a progression that things are getting better.
mm,
And so when we look historically, there's less disease ever in human history. There's less poverty, extreme poverty. 95% of Jesus's audience was in extreme poverty. 95%. The
wow.
life expectancy was like 32 years old. I mean, we've made so many progressions in humanity that, yeah, there's issues, but it's like My grandma lived to 101. She lived through the Great Depression, World War I and World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and all this stuff, right? And they interpreted every event through the lens of Jesus is coming back. This is the end. And it's no different today. They take something that seems scary, uncertain, and they put it through a lens that this has to mean Jesus is coming back. Jesus doesn't even know when he's coming back. But in scripture, he doesn't even know. Like, so when people are like, yeah, he's coming back really soon, it's like, how do you know? Like, Jesus doesn't even know. Like, how do you know something he doesn't? Like, so for me, it's more about how do I said revival is under Reformation. Revival doesn't change a city, Reformation does. It brings everything back to its original intent and original design. And then Reformation is under terraformation. We begin to build what no eye has seen, no ear has heard, so that when Jesus returns, it seems like home to him. It's mirroring his world. So I'm more hopeful than some maybe would be. I'm interpreting things through we're the light of the world, where we can govern the seasons of the world. I can find more warfare if I look for it. I can find more glory if I look for it too. It's just wherever I'm placing my focus, it's going to be a magnet and draw more of that to me. And so I'm always feeding on what God's doing. I mean, you can look at Afghanistan and it's crazy, yet the miracles that have been happening there are nuts. Second fastest growing church in the world. There are more people coming to Christ like crazy there. And that's kind of historically the case, where there's great persecution, there's great advancement of the kingdom. And you're going to come out of this, and you're going to hear some incredible miracles that have happened to people, that they were protected with angels, they didn't die, like all sorts of amazing things. And so
100%.
Even in a dark environment, and it is, the light still shines bright.
Come on. So what is your advice to all these people watching? And now obviously the world as we've known it is shaken, and people are freaking out, vax, no vax, jab, no jab, want to fight each other on that. So what is some advice you can give to people who are now seeing that maybe, the governmental systems, the education system, the financial system is all being exposed and shaken? What are some things you can share with them?
The church is going to be exposed too.
Mm.
There's going to be some stuff coming out that's going to shock people. And so we've got to know who we are and have a connection with the heart of God to traverse this. Because if you're more focused on what's trending here, you're going to be very anxious, very afraid. So I've got to know what's trending in heaven. And for me, praying in tongues is one of the quickest ways to do that. It's like an algorithm. I'm tapping into what's trending in heaven. I want to know that more than what's in my newsfeed, so that when I go to my newsfeed, I'm from a higher place in my thought life. And so I think the best thing we can do is shut off some of the technology and amp up our fellowship with God. As life increases, our fellowship with God has to increase. And what happens, there's a momentum happening in society, and it feels crazy, right? I mean, you can get sucked into it very easily. Yeah. And in a space like that, the momentum of society, the momentum of my fellowship with God has to be at the same pace. I live in the pace of grace. There can be a proper flow.
I love it. I love your language. I hope someone's taking notes. We need to write notes on here. This is so good. The pace of grace. Love it. There is a question on here. Maybe we'll take that question, then we can come back. Have you got time? How much time you
got? Yeah, I got time.
Boom. Okay, so we'll put this as a long kind of question, but it may help a few people.
Yeah, great question, Rosie. To me, the gifts of the Spirit really are about, is there an assignment? And so like some schools of the supernatural, for example, one of the things that can come out of that that's a negative is people are slaves to the gift. So they are walking the streets and they can't not pray for someone that needs healing. And there's a verse, I can't pull it up, but I think it's in Matthew, where Jesus says he saw the crowds and he went up the mountain.
Mm.
Like the crowd had a bunch of needs and he left.
Mm.
Like Jesus didn't respond to need. He responded to faith in the Father's direction.
Mm.
And so if I'm feeling moved, it's like, all right, Lord, am I supposed to do something? Am I supposed to pray? Am I supposed to prophesy? If I don't feel anything or sense anything, hear anything, I don't do anything. Because otherwise it's not a sustainable life. It's not sustainable to feel like you have to respond to every need and even every impression, because it just might be your impression.
Mm.
So that's why I immediately engage. All right, Lord, is this you? Is there an assignment? And if there's not, then I move on and I sleep at night.
Awesome. We got another question here. Oh, not that one. It's moved. Where's the question? Here it is. And this is something interesting where, things are called old technology, like deliverance. And maybe you want to touch on that too. Like these two things. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the whole argument that, demons don't exist, it's all in your head. It's like, yeah, come with me for a little while and you'll see some things that are actually real. It's like, this is a very real world. And people that start denying that, I get really nervous, because it's like I've cast out countless demons out of people that were very real and caused very real issues that immediately ended when they left.
Mm.
And it wasn't just a thought, it was literally an energetic being. And so tongues, I love speaking in tongues. It's one of my favorite things to do. I don't see that as old technology. You call it ancient technology, but it's still useful today.
Mm.
And, to me, it's like Paul, post cross, full new covenant is like, hey, I pray in tongues more than any of you. He had a great value for that. And so for me, it's like I'm praying without my frontal lobe being involved, which means I'm not praying through my matrix of thinking. I'm praying through his. I'm in his mind.
Come on, man. I'm just imagining Brian cast a demon out, and we've seen all these other people cast demons out. And then I'm just imagining Brian just like, hey, man, get out. And it's done. It must be so cool. We got another question here. You mentioned speaking in tongues, but I haven't received this gift yet. What advice would you give someone 5 months in their journey?
Ollie Stare. Is that how you say it? Ollie Stare. That's a cool name.
Well, Alistair.
Alistair.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's inside of you. It's not outside of you. It's a language that he's placed inside of you. The Holy Spirit's in you. You're one with him. So it's a language of the Spirit. And so it's accessed by faith, just like everything in the kingdom's accessed by faith. And so my encouragement, because I see it as a language of worship, just begin to worship out loud and set your intention on the promise, that this is a promise, that he would bring the Holy Spirit. Set your intention on, I have the Holy Spirit. I'm in him. He's in me. I'm in him. I don't know when I end and he begins. We're just one. And then just by faith, just begin to speak and have the expectation that, you might hear a syllable and hit that syllable, keep hitting that syllable, and it might break open and flow into more. And so that's how it happened for me.
So good. That's how it happened for me too. Like I was really worried about it. And I started with Alaba. I still remember feeling like such a dork at this prayer meeting, and there were all these people going hard, and I'm just like Alaba. But at some point, I don't even know when, it just something clicked over, And
Yeah, man, the flow.
so good. If you got any more questions, put them in here, guys. I guess another question I just ask is, what do you say to people that are looking for purpose or their purpose? What would be your advice to them?
I think one thing would recognize your frustrations. like what frustrates you, usually ties into something you're supposed to bring a solution to. It's like, if someone's like, man, I'm so frustrated when children are not given a voice. It's like, well, your purpose probably has to do something with children having a voice.
Mm.
And then I also look for prophetic patterns. So what are like repeated phrases, words that I keep getting over seasons? And it's like, that's God's highlighter to me. Like, I need to pay attention to that. And many times that's tying into, this is who you are. This is what you're called to do. And it's super important, because otherwise we're doing things that are not necessarily tied to who we are. And it's not wrong. It just is taking away the distribution of time and energy towards what we really should be doing. Because when you're in your lane, Joseph, when you're in your lane, the impact is much bigger.
Mm. Yeah, totally. Here's a question. Where's a good place to start in your journey of interacting with creation?
Yeah.
And, I'd like to piggyback of that too, because I was going to ask that also, is how do you, when someone says, how do I engage heaven, or how do I engage the word? What advice would you give them?
The way it started for me, honestly, I always want to walk. I like to walk. And God says, hey, you should speak to the earth. And I was like, what? This is like years ago. Like, speak to the earth. Okay. And then he reminds me of Job 12, speak to the earth and it will instruct you. And I said, okay. So just by faith, I knelt down, put my hand on the ground, and I started to speak. I said, I'm a son of light, and I speak blessing over this land. You will prosper. And then the words kind of came out. I wasn't thinking this. And I said, and I call forth supply from the earth for my family. So if you're in a home right now, an apartment, your car, whatever, everything around you came from the earth. All of it. There's a supply in the earth. From the earth came seed. All the stuff that has grown has come from the womb of the earth. And so it's really the role that we have. The occult will take soil, they'll curse it, put it on a building like a business, and it'll curse the business. They know how to use this technology.
Mm.
So the body of Christ just needs to catch up and redeem this back, where the earth responds to obedience or disobedience. The earth is the first witness of the fall, the first witness of the blood of Christ in the garden. Wow. And so it's longing for us to know who we are, to govern well, and to speak to the earth. And so I was in Texas a year ago this month, speaking on this, and I could feel the tension in the room. And it was a room that people were open to stuff, and they were a little nervous with this topic. And I said, hey, let's just stop and speak a blessing over the land that we're on. We're kind of in a big patch of land. Dude, immediately it starts pouring rain.
Wow.
No rain forecast, 0% chance. Lightning, thunder. And so I'm just like, hey, the earth is responding to our voice.
Wow.
And so to me, that's part of interaction. It's also animals paying attention. The house we live in currently, we've been here 12 years, I think. Every year there's been an animal that comes that speaks to a season that we're about to enter. And then it's crazy. And so I'm always like, I'm paying attention to what's going on around me. Like I'm expecting a message. Like, I'm not trying to find one. Like, if it's not there, it's just like, all right. If I'm seeing something that's unusual, I'm like, all right, Lord, what are you saying? What is this about?
So good. Was there another question? Oh, you kind of answered that one already.
I got 6 more minutes.
Okay, 6 more minutes. Boom. What are your thoughts on people who go into the business space or politics, education? The 7 mountains. What are your thoughts on that? The 7 mountain mandate and people that get. I mean, I understand it's like a framework. Obviously, some people try and think it's a theology, which is a bit crazy. But what are your thoughts on all of that?
I don't like the image, just because it reminds me of a pyramid scheme. So it's like we're at the top and you pay your dues, and it's like we've started an MLM or something. But to me, it's Daniel is in a dark system, right? It's messed up, but he's promoted from within it. He doesn't destroy the system.
Mm.
To me, the mountain image is like we're trying to conquer something. We're trying to get on top. And I'm like, that's not, the kingdom is influencing from within.
Mm.
If you look at Daniel, we don't like to talk about this part as much, but he learned all their witchcraft. He learned all their stuff. He knew it all. And yet he was beyond all that stuff. And so he was promoted because of the expression of wisdom through his life. And so business, education, they all are looking for wisdom. And so to me, it's like, I want to be planted in a system that's dark so that from within it, I'll be promoted because I've got the answers.
Mm.
Not like I, Brian, or you, Joseph. It's like I'm one with God of all creation. And so that becomes, now Joseph has a seat at the table. Why? Because he's the only one who knows what to do.
Mm.
Like that's different from, man, if we could just get Joseph in power, then we could have influence. You don't need to be in power to have influence. You just need to know the answers.
Wow.
Like Joseph, he wasn't at the top, right? At the top of the food chain. Yet he was continually being promoted because he had wisdom.
Mm. That's so good. So just to wrap up, I mean, what is something you want to leave with everybody, Brian? What is something you want to commission everyone with, you know?
Yeah, come on. Yeah, I would just say remain childlike, be very curious, don't lose wonder. Wonder's a window to a lot of things. And, don't become adult-like. We're not the adults of God, we're the children of God. And so it's like if I stay in that childlike space, heart connection with God and people, there's nothing to be afraid of. You're going to continue to grow, and you're going to continue to see how God sees, think how God thinks. And to me, that's really the simplicity of our journey. I need to be like a child, wonder-filled, and have my heart open. My head is to be like flint, and my heart is to be open, not the other way around. A lot of people's hearts are like flint, and their head is soft. So they're easily offended, and they're derailed very easily. But it's like, hey, words bounce off, but my heart is open.
Wow. That's so good. Guys, this was amazing. Make sure to rewatch this. Make sure to connect with Brian. Is there anything you want to say on that school or how they can connect with you? Anything specific you want to hit?
Yeah, we're doing a second year of our School of Divine Intelligence. My friend Drew Neal and I. Last year, we looked at the 9 human intelligences that psychologists have identified, and we explored how we think like God in these areas, which was super fun. And now we're going to do a School of Wonder, Wisdom, and Understanding for 9 months. It starts the end of September. DivineIntelligence.co. If you sign up, you'll get the first year for free, all 9 months. And then we'll start September 29th. We would love to have you. It's just once a month, so it's not a huge time commitment.
Awesome, man. And so you'll get the year 1 as well. That's great. Make sure to connect with Brian, guys, like you just saw. And I can guarantee you, if you rewatch this, you're going to hear a whole new podcast, and then maybe again, and you'll hear another one. But I just want to thank you, Brian. This is amazing. I'm so thankful for our connection. I honor your journey. Really, really excited for everything you're doing. And guys, yeah, awesome. Thanks for being with us, guys. We're going to say bye to you, Brian, if you just stay with me for a minute. But everyone else, take care. Bless you. Have a good afternoon, good evening, good morning.
Peace, everybody.
Faith and patience. Faith and patience. Patience means allow it to happen. Stay the same. Stay persistent. Keep going. Faith, know that it can happen at any moment. Get excited because it can happen at any moment. You were so close. Don't quit now. Keep pushing. You got this.